Sriram, thanks very much for that. I told you you would not be disappointed by the conversations today talking about how to really do things with these technologies and not just figure out ways to insert them into your business lines. I have a long list here of legislative accomplishments and so on by the gentleman that I'm about to talk to for the next period of time. But I think the most important endorsement is the fact that pretty much every agency leader that I talk to, especially in the information technology realm, when I say, who on Capitol Hill really gets it? Who understands your life and the job that you're trying to do and what you're trying to deliver to your mission partners at the agencies? I hear a couple of names, and one of them that I hear all the time is Congressman Will Hurd. Please welcome him to the stage. You didn't have to run, but I'm glad to have you here. I want to start with an apology, because the last time we saw each other, I came up and just kind of ran up on you at National Airport as you were going home to your district, I suppose. And so I thank you for indulging me in talking about the CIO Authority Act that you're talking about.
I'm just glad you weren't a tracker. So.
I did not have a camera. Tell me, the first thing I want to start with is you're transitioning in this Congress, as pretty much every member is, from majority to minority, but you're also transitioning in committees of authority. For the last two Congresses, you led the IT subcommittee in the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. You're now on Appropriations and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. What's that mean for the kinds of things that you're going to look at technology-wise and the priorities that you want to set and that you want to work with the agencies on?
Well, I still get to work on all the issues that we started at Oversight and Government Reform. Nobody thought, OGR was the place you came for fireworks, right? Not thoughtful conversations on technology. And Robin Kelly, my partner in crime at the time, and I think we were able to change that narrative and focus on things like FITARA, on adoption of AI. Last Congress, there were 7 hearings on AI in the House and the Senate. 4 of those was at my subcommittee. And so, what am I doing now on appropriations? I'm still talking FITARA, right? Now the agency heads and the CFOs come in front of appropriations. And my first question is, what is your FITARA scorecard, right? What is your FITARA score, excuse me? And we had the head of VA there recently, last week, 2 weeks ago, and he goes, I don't know. I was like,
That's a bad answer.
Bad answer. However, they had a B+. Actually, I think they're supposed to be a B-, but we are able to now make sure that the agency head and deputy agency head are focusing on these issues. I've been asking every senior official, where are you in creating an MGT, working capital fund? So the ability that I know Jerry Connolly at OGR is going to continue to have those quarterly hearings, and then I'm going to continue to be pressing this when it comes to appropriations and start looking at how is money tied to that. So I think it gives it just widens our focus. On the intelligence community as well. A lot of times the intelligence community and DoD wants to be carved out of things that Congress passes. Well, I still get to bring all them in front of HPSCI and ask the questions we should. Are you modernizing your digital infrastructure? How are you thinking about artificial intelligence as a tool? One of the most difficult things for me is everybody thinks AI is a destination rather than a tool, and then how do you use that tool and adapt it into your environment, into your operations, to help answer questions you need to ask. So these are the types of things that I'll still be continuing to ask through appropriations and HPSCI.
The former CTO of one of the intelligence agencies said on my program not too long ago, artificial intelligence is just software. Now, not everybody agrees with that, and I understand that. But there, I think, is a growing understanding in government to what you said, and I mentioned in my opening remarks, the point here today is to learn how to solve problems with the technology and not just how to start using AI.
Right.
What can you do in Congress to drive that, to remind people that mission delivery is the ultimate goal and AI, Internet of Things, and so on are just the ways to get there, not the destination.
Well, the most important role I think Congress has is our oversight role on these and asking the questions about how is that being adopted, making sure that the folks that are coming through our committee are prepared to know that the question is going to get asked, which forces them to go and ask. I always loved the super boring hearings because, you know, you're like, we knew there was a problem, be like, why didn't you do this? Oh, wait, what do you mean, Congressman? We fixed it last night, you know? You're like, oh, okay, right? You know, no fireworks. And so to be able to continue to know that question is coming. And that's why practitioners and people that are on the leading edge of artificial intelligence until we get more adoption of AI into processes, those that are on the cutting edge now have an additional role of making sure those enterprises they're trying to adopt whatever AI tool knows how to use it, knows how to leverage it to answer questions and help them answer questions they need. And once you get that going, then that will grow throughout that agency or ultimately department. But there's some other basic things that we should be doing. We should be making sure that there are basic research, right, to go into this field. I'm currently working on a national plan for artificial intelligence. And it's basic. How do we make sure we keep the United States the leader in development of AI, use of AI? How do we make sure that the ethics that is going to be adopted around artificial intelligence are based on Western liberal democracies, not China? Right? China is not using facial recognition to make it easier to buy groceries in the grocery store. They are using it because they want to continue to keep track of their citizens. So we need to make sure as the ethics around this develop, it's based on our values. We also need to make sure that the technologies around artificial intelligence that we're focused on those. And so 18, 19 countries have a national strategy for artificial intelligence. We don't. And so that's why we're trying to work on, and this is to augment some of the initiatives already that are happening at the White House. And so that's another role where I think Congress can say, this is important. We're going to put research dollars around this. We're going to make sure we're thinking through the ethics on this and have a commitment to the United States being number one on this topic.
One of the challenges that you're up against in that is that in both China and Russia, Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin can and have, in the case of artificial intelligence, said, this is a national priority, and everybody jumps and makes it a national priority. That's not how things work here, and it's served us well for 225 years, but we're not there anymore. And so what does that look like?
So I will always look, an authoritarian regime, absolutely, they can move all factors of production into one direction. President Xi, I don't think he's a president. He's an emperor, right? And he's going to be there for the next 40, 45 years. They have their 20-year plan, longer than 20-year plan, right? But I will always take American ingenuity, American creativity, right? I will always bet on us. We just need to make sure that the regulatory environment around all these future industries is not overly burdensome, that we ensure that this allows for continued creativity and entrepreneurship. I will always take it. Look, when Americans woke up to the fact that Sputnik was now orbiting around the Earth, that was a real wake-up call and made us focus. And I don't know what that event is when you talk about artificial intelligence. I don't know what that event is when you talk about 5G. You can't have a conversation on AI without also talking about 5G. And this is probably the area that worries me the most. Why did Amazon, why did Facebook, why did Google, why did all these great companies that took advantage of where we are today in technology develop in the United States of America? Because we had the best 4G infrastructure. Chinese saw that, Chinese recognized that, and so they said that's why they want to make sure that they own 5G development, not because they want to be an infrastructure provider, but they want all the companies that are in the application stack of 5G to be Chinese companies. So how do we ensure that we can compete with Huawei? We know that there's only 3 other competitors, Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung. How are we going to work to ensure that U.S. cities have the greatest 5G deployment, so we start seeing those companies that are going to be part of that application stack start developing here? How are we going to make sure that Germany and our allies are building a 5G infrastructure that's going to ultimately be compatible with ours and not the Chinese and not built on Huawei? So we will not achieve true ubiquitous use of artificial intelligence until we have that 5G infrastructure to do it, because we all know because of download speeds, latency, things like that. And so how are we leading there? And this is an area, again, I think Congress can play. Can we do something over the next 15 to 18 years to incentivize the development of the networks and all the tools you need on the edge in order to facilitate 5G? I think we can, and I think there's really only 2 bipartisan issues left in Congress, or right at this moment.
Certainly you can come up with a couple over the next months, but okay, 2 today.
Cybersecurity, and I talk cybersecurity broadly, right? And then 2, the threat of China. And so I think this is something that we can come together on and continue to work on as we get closer to a November election.
One of the things that I think is interesting about 5G, Congressman, is that I don't have the best memory in the world, but I don't remember during the transition from 3G to 4G, the marketing efforts by a wide variety of different companies trying to generate awareness among just the average citizen walking down the street about the potential benefits of 5G, and then within that, the companies that you mentioned and others also saying to the business-to-business market, this is why this is important. What do you think is driving that in the 4G to 5G transition? And again, how does somebody at a government agency leverage that possibility and understand today what's coming over the horizon?
I think the transformationalness, if that's a word, of 5G, is bigger. You can't have true driverless vehicles, right, in any kind of scale, without the ability that 5G brings you. You can't have wide-scale adoption of artificial intelligence without 5G. You can't have smart cities without 5G. And I think we can't predict what are the things that are going to come out or be created because you can download 150 gigabytes in a second and a half, right? Like nobody can think that far in advance. So I think people recognize the difficulty of it. So why is there so much marketing around 5G? One of the things that's getting in the way of the deployment of the antennas and the edge devices you need for 5G are a lot of local laws. Local, municipalities are trying to view this as an opportunity, the goose that laid the golden egg. And so they're in some places, they're charging to put that antenna up, they're overcharging, let's call it. And many of these cities don't recognize that the benefit of quick deployment of the 5G network is going to bring resources that other cities don't potentially have. So because of the need for additional, the density of antennas you need in order to have a proper 5G network, it's making it, that's a barrier. So I think you have to educate cities and municipalities on the value of what 5G can do in a way to help the expansion of that 5G network. I don't know if that was the case when we went from 3G to 4G. And I think people also recognize the first mover advantage and how impactful that's going to be. And I think that first mover advantage going from 4G to 5G is even bigger than what first movers advantage had from 3G to 4G.
You've mentioned cybersecurity as one of the two bipartisan issues on the Hill right now. We've talked a little bit about Internet of Things because all of those driverless cars are Internet of Things devices. All the smart cities, sensors, same thing. You have a bill called the Internet of Things Cybersecurity Improvement Act. What does it improve? What's the challenge that you see regarding security around all of these devices?
Well, what we were trying to do, and this was a bill that we introduced this week, Mark Warner and Cory Gardner in the Senate, myself and Robin Kelly in the House. And ultimately, the goal of this bill was to ensure that when the federal government purchases IoT devices, we're purchasing secure devices. That's simple. The federal government has a difficulty that right now, or I shouldn't say right now, as of December of 2018, when we did the last FITARA scorecard, there were still 6 agencies that didn't know all the software that they had on their network. I'm pretty sure if you don't know all the software you have on your network, you probably don't know all the hardware you have on your network either, right? And so how do we ensure that we have a standard of what security around IoT means? And we said NIST, you're going to do that. NIST by a certain date, you're going to have those recommendations. 2, OMB, you are tasked with making sure that whatever those recommendations around the purchasing of IoT devices is going to be uniform across the federal agencies. And 3, vendors, if you're selling in the federal government, you better have developed this widget with security in mind. And one of the problems with in previous versions of IoT bills, you were trying to hard code into the bill things that needed to happen. I think we all agree you shouldn't hard code password as the password for the root level access to the device.
That's a bad idea.
Bad idea.
Yeah.
2, you should be able to update your device remotely. Makes sense. However, that requires that device to have an operating system on it. And there are some scenarios in which your device, you probably don't need an operating system on it. So in that case, is there a way to ensure that that device can be secured other ways? And so that's the value of making NIST be the one to identify what the standard should be for security, because it can evolve. They can make changes quicker than passing a legislation. I always use the example of chip and pin in the financial services industry. That was decided, and then as soon as the ink dried, chip and pin was like old technology. Mm-hmm. And so trying to prevent that when it comes to something that's evolving as quickly as IoT. And then 3rd, buy secure stuff, period, end of story. And let's not have another OPM breach. And we all know that, our DVRs tried to attack us a couple of months ago, right? I guess it's almost a year now with the Mirai botnet attack. And we all know that somewhere between 21 and 30 billion devices are going to be, there's going to be 20 to 31 billion connected devices by the end of next year, right? That's like an average of 4 per person in the world. Mm-hmm. So the attack surface is pretty vast. So guess what? The federal government, we should be a leader in making sure when devices get introduced into our infrastructure that it's done securely.
The notes that your office sent me said that the goal of this legislation is light touch minimum security requirements for those procurements that you described. Given the changing landscape, who does the continuous evaluation of new devices versus the new threat vectors that are presenting themselves?
I think it's NIST.
NIST also?
Yeah, it is ultimately going to be NIST. I think NIST is one of those entities that has great reputation. They have the technical challenges, technical capability, I meant to say. And I think it's going to be, they seek input. We also said in the legislation that they have to seek input from the security research community and academia, right? So you have a lot of people providing input onto what the future of threats ultimately look like. Keith Alexander, the former head of NSA, always says, if the public sector thinks they can defend themselves by themselves, or the private sector thinks they can defend themselves by themselves, it's the equivalent of the French thinking the Maginot Line is going to defend them from the Germans, right? We have to work together. There has to be that level of cooperation, and we should be thinking about it as operational collaboration, right, between the public and private sector.
What drives that effectively in your view? What do you as a legislator and what do our friends who are executive branch officials here in the audience have to do to make that effective, that collaboration between public and private sector?
Well, I have found, and this is the reason I talk about congressional oversight so much, when the concept of the FOTARA scorecard came about, I was at first suspicious. It's like, really? A scorecard? How is this going to change behaviors? But it has, because it is a consistent focus on key drivers that are going to lead to good behavior. So you need to start with ensuring that there's a consistent conversation around this. We need to get to a point in operational collaboration, and specifically, there's two states. There is the normal state, and then there's an emergency state, right? And activity within each one of those states is different, but there are some similar drivers within each one of those states, and part of that is intelligence sharing. The financial services sector has a better idea of where the next attacks on their infrastructure is going to come from and how. And they have a better idea than the NSA or the CIA does. So let's turn those assumptions into collection requirements, give that to the federal government to do what only the federal government can do, and that's nation-state collection, and then get those answers back in the hands of the people that need to defend themselves. That would be more, that would be a better way of us working together. I always ask industry, what's the best piece of information you've ever gotten from the federal government?
How does that question go over?
Just like that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we got to make sure that information is actionable. We got to make sure that it's relevant, and it starts with, again, I'm biased. I'm a human intelligence guy, right? I'm a professional intelligence officer, and so I have a bias towards the importance of information and intelligence. And the better questions we ask, the better answers we're going to get. And that starts with having the people that are doing this in those industries helping to generate the questions that we should be going out and trying to understand. And so that's one way that we can force that. Another reason that gets in the way, security clearances. Why the hell does it take 10 months quickly, right? They're laughing at 10 months because that's like short period of time,
yeah, they're
right?
going, that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, we can clap for that. So really, do you think my neighbor, the person who lived next to me 10 years ago, has a better insight onto who I am than all the stuff I've ever clicked on, Like, it doesn't. And so why are we doing security clearances the same way that we have for the last 100 years? I will say something that, everybody's going to think I'm crazy when I say this. We should be able to do a security clearance in 1 week. Right?
Right.
And when you do that, you're going to be able to make sure that the people we need to be collaborating with in the private sector have the ability to have the conversations with the folks in the public sector. And that's why one of the things I'm most excited about, Eric Swalwell and Eric is the chairman of a subcommittee within HPSCI. I'm his ranking member, and one of the areas we're going to be looking at is the clearance process within the federal government.
They didn't think you were crazy. They thought you were right on target.
Yeah, now my staff's freaking out because they're like, okay, now we got to do this. You know.
Well, that's what staff is for. And yours is terrific. One of the things that I want to finish on in the time we have left, Congressman, is you talked about FITARA and the skepticism that you had about the FITARA scorecard originally. One of the things that I think is encouraging about what has been generated by that piece of legislation and by the process thereafter is exactly what you said about having Secretary Wilkie in front of your committee. The people who are answering questions about this technology before you and to each other are no longer just the IT people. The people who are answering these questions and need to know the answers to the questions about the cybersecurity posture of their agencies and so on are the equivalents of the CEOs and COOs of private sector companies. What does that do, in your view, to inform the way that you will move forward to try to accelerate that process and then maybe apply the same concepts to artificial intelligence? What's your agency doing about AI? What's your agency doing about IoT and automated technology and so on?
There's a reason the first line of the FITARA scorecard is CIO authorities. Does the CIO report directly to the agency head or the deputy agency head? Because it shows whether the agency has a focus on protecting and understanding their digital infrastructure. It's not just on protecting the digital infrastructure. Are you focused on providing better citizen-facing services through your digital enterprise? And and the reason that was the first column within the FITARA scorecard is because in industry, the CIO or the CISO reported directly to the CEOs because they understood that your CIO is not just an operational cost, right? It's a driver of your business. And so we need to make sure that within the federal government that you have that same mentality. And so yes, we should, I always think industry is X number of years ahead of government on processes and how to do things. So we should look to them for models on how we do it within the federal government. That's why I'm excited about on appropriations asking these questions to the agency head. Our CIOs are actually quite fantastic. They may not. I heard a couple of them laughing out there in the crowd because when they got dragged in front of my committee, I didn't always show that, right? But it was rarely the CIO didn't have the technical capabilities to do something. It's they didn't have the authority within that agency to do it. And that's why we transitioned from making sure when we did FITARA scorecard hearings and hearings on FITARA, we had the CIO, the CFO, and hopefully the deputy agency head. Because most of my questions were not focused on the CIO, it was the CFO. The CIO is supposed to be responsible for the procurement for everything they need in order to defend their digital infrastructure. That wasn't happening because the CFOs and the procurement wing of the agency was getting in the way. So that's why I asked all my questions towards the CFOs. And if they weren't allowed to do something, it was because the senior leadership of the agency wasn't allowing it to happen. And so that's why we're going to continue to keep that pressure to make sure. That's why we did the MGT Act, the Modernizing Government Technology Act. I wanted the CIOs to have complete control of a working capital fund in order to modernize their infrastructure. Shocker, even after we passed this legislation, got support of the Appropriations Committee, CFOs were like, actually, you can't do that. We just passed a legislation, got it signed into law saying the CIO should have it. So that's part of the inertia that you have to fight within a federal agency, and we're going to continue to do that.
I have 13 more questions, and we have 50 seconds left. So
rapid fire.
I'm just gonna say thank you very much for joining me, and I promise the next time I see you in the airport, I won't run up on you.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, Congressman. Thank you very much.